Good morning, everyone. Very welcome to this web session of Zukunft Personal. My name is Arjen Swank, and I'm one of the consultants at Effectory. And as a company, we're building our global presence in the field of human insights. And what we try to do is we help organizations optimize the feedback of their people to increase their performance or to create a better employee experience. Today, I'm very happy to have you here and also to invite you to my home office. Unfortunately, just like a lot of you, maybe I'm working from my home with the lockdown going on here in the Netherlands. And I know many more people globally are in the same position at this time. But it's not the first time that we've been hit by these COVID waves. We've been going through 24 months of disruption, pandemic, difficult times, and also a challenging time for people in HR. Because what is it that we do? How can we engage our people? How can we increase our employee experience or give people the best experience that they can have in their offices while they're actually working from the home office? They don't see their team so much. They are disconnected from their colleagues. For today, what we try to talk about, or at least what I try to share with you, are a few practical traits of what you can do to highly increase the engagement of your people and to increase the employee experience or the feeling of connectedness with the organization. The key line for me is how to retain your talents. Because if you look at your talents, this is what's actually the biggest development throughout our time is that in the last 6 months, we see that talents are moving, they're changing jobs, they're changing organizations, even despite the uncertain times. So what is it that you could do as an HR professional, or whether you're dialing and as a business professional, maybe you're in the C level and you want to have some practical trades of what can I do in my organization to really retain my people, and what can I learn from what a factory shares, but also in the general business environment to really have an engaging workforce. The agenda for today, if we look at what we are going to discuss, are actually four different pillars. So first, just a quick definition. Of course, we start with a definition, but it's quite important to understand who are the talents in your organization. Secondary, we're looking at what we see happening. What do I, as a consultant, see within the working environment, within Germany, within Europe, within the world? So what are the trends that we see? Thirdly, what are the different engagement trends observable? So how does engagement relate to different demographic factors? And fourthly, closing down, and I promise you, I'll leave you with 14 practical traits, 7 traits, 7 secrets of highly engaged workforces, of good employers, of people with a very engaged staff, and a very, well, influential, impactful employee experience. So let's kick off. First, looking at talent. If we try to understand who your talents are, we need to know what they are, what they're considering, what the things are that they are finding important. And if I think about the pandemic, this is an interesting time to define talent as well. Because if you think about what's happening beyond the pandemic or after the pandemic, the first thing that comes to mind is actually this trend of great resignation, which is influential on the talents that you keep on board. So this great resignation, this trend of people leaving jobs, the people changing, becoming mobile, quitting organizations that they've been working for years and years, is something observable in, well, throughout the world. And it's an interesting development when you think about the fact that people like certainty, but on the other hand, choose to have this uncertain future, maybe becoming individual entrepreneurs, but especially leaving their organization. And if we think about the people that are leaving, we need to know who is it that we define as a talent? Because of course, a lot of people are thinking about the talents which are leaving the organization because it's just a trending thing. We need to retain our talents. But on the other hand, can't we say that everybody actually in your organization is a talent? So if you look at the Cambridge Dictionary, and well, it's one of my favorite definitions, but if you look at Cambridge Dictionary, fortunately, they also came up with the same development of a definition of talent. Because a talent is someone who has a natural ability to be good at something that can do that without actually being taught. So if you think about the talents in your organization, they could be the people in IT, fixing your IT environments, the people in marketing and commerce or in sales. They could be your specialists. Actually, anybody can be a talent as long as they're good at something without being taught. So if we think about the talents which are leaving, these are actually the people that you want to retain in your organization because they have a uh, less dependency on your resources in terms of training, in terms of development, and they're highly likely to be engaged people, but to also propel your organization forward. There's not much investment and there's a lot of payout to have these people remain in your organization. So thinking about the fact that they are resigning from jobs, what is it that you can do to keep them in? Now, at first, if we want to understand why people leave jobs in the first place, the question is, what kind of model can we develop, or what kind of model can we use to actually think about the drivers or the priorities these people have to choose another job? And usually, a lot of people look at the Maslow's pyramid. It's the 5 levels of needs, and maybe you want to add the 6th level. I just recently saw that graph with Wi-Fi as the 6th level in the Maslow's pyramid. But maybe if you think about it in a different way, and I very much like the model of Anthony Robbins, he describes why talent is motivated to join or stay at a company in a different way. He defines 3 levels and 6 different factors that define why, and this is my organization in Effectory, why people join Effectory. Why would they stay in Effectory? Why, even in a time of shock when they're presented with a pandemic like this, would they still choose to spend their time in a company like Effectory? And the model of needs that Anthony Robbins describes, the first level that he defines is the definition of certainty, where he says people intrinsically need a certainty in their lives. And this is also culturally based. Some people like more certainty, some people like less certainty. And he opposes that to variety. And why I like this so much is because it describes the need for people to have a certain critical base. So for instance, they want to understand, if I want to develop myself towards the future, I have a certain threshold. Maybe it's a $1 million bank account, but it's something that gives me certainty in my life. Secondary, he says variety is important. You need to keep pushing people to learn new things, to have new experiences. And this variety teaches them all kinds of new things. And think about it yourself. If you get taught new ideas, it's a bit tough, it's struggling. You leave behind your safe harbors. But once you've learned these new traits, it's a great feeling. You've actually obtained something. So this is the first level. The second level that Robbins describes is the need for significance, which is actually much motivated by having a feeling of significance, so motivated by your managers in an organization. So you can have this in your personal lives, but if you look at it from a business perspective, these people are looking for recognition. Managers need to recognize the efforts that are being made by your talents, which could virtually be anyone in your organization. And they're looking for love and connection. Now, the love part is a bit soft. I fully agree. This one you can find at your home. But the connection part, this is something, well, if you think about the COVID pandemic, for sure, which is lacking. People have been working from home. They're disconnected from their friends, from their families, from their colleagues, from their teams, from their companies. And this has a significant influence on how they feel, but also the needs that they have for that connection to look for a new job and say, hey, I can't find it here. Let me look for it somewhere else. The third level that people are looking for is for growth. So this is personal development, professional development, something that they can learn, something new, which is interlinked to variety, having that feeling of having obtained a new skill or a new job level, or at least growth, something that you have the feeling that you're not standing still. And then when you've fulfilled all these 5 needs, you're looking for contribution. You're looking to contribute to the world. And this very much relates to a lot of the needs of the new generation, where, I mean, a lot of discussions going about societal impact or societal development. The millennials, the Generation Z, they want to work for an organization that contributes, that has a purpose, that goes further or beyond a financial target or a financial number. They want to contribute to a better world in the future. So just think about this. If you think about these different levels versus the question, what motivates talent to join and stay at a company? What motivated talent to join your company? What motivates them to stay at your company? What retains them in your organization? And what would be driving factors to push them out? Did you fulfill all the human needs within this framework of certainty, variety, significance, connection, growth, and contribution? And how does that relate over time during the COVID pandemic? Now, what do we see happening? What do we see happening around us in this world? First of all, a lot of organizations are building towards the future of work. If I look at the Zukunft website, whatever web session, webinar, interactive event, a lot of the discussions in the panels are going around the future of work. And if you just do a quick Google search on, okay, what does the future of work look like? There's a lot of predictions. And one nice aspect about the future is nobody can really predict what it's like. But just get a grip on, wait a minute, what does the future of work look like for me? And everybody's publishing on different levels. We're looking at sustainability, innovation, the battle for talent, the rise of the workspace consumer, the future agenda, the gig economy, the remote workers, the different setup for let's say the interactiveness of and connection with your teams, and a lot of the different changes that are coming at us. And recommended consultancy firms have a lot of different predictions, but everybody kind of gathers around this hybrid form of work or the future of work. This happens around us. But if I conclude from this search on what it actually means that we need to do to embrace for the future of work, we need to foster our human capital. And usually if I tell this to HR people, they say, yeah, of course, our people are the most important assets for a company. But let this slide also be viewed by your C-level managers, your CEOs, your CFOs. Your human capital factor still is a very important pillar to ensure that we have a sustainable future of work. They can innovate. They can help you be, have bounce backs during the pandemic. So foster your human capital. Secondary, if we look at the Effectory pulses that we're carrying out, and these are the last pulses that we've done in the last quarter, what do we see happening in terms of trends around us where we look at the workforce that we are interviewing? Around, 3/4 out of the organizational populations are happy or satisfied with how their organization manages COVID-19. But this is a significant drop from what it was last year. So if we look at last year's performance, 86% was satisfied with the organizational management of the COVID-19 situation. And this is dropping. And we see this trend moving along the lines further and further down. So people are less satisfied. There's, of course, an interplay with the way that it's influenced by governmental measures, etc. But for sure, we see that people are less satisfied in this pandemic. 83% is actually confident about the organization's future. This is not a very big drop, but it's good to know that a lot of people within the organization are still happy, or at least, feel that their organization contributes best to work towards a sustainable future, despite the pandemic. This is an important part for everyone working not in healthcare. So usually a lot of the emphasis or focus in the discussions is around the healthcare sector. But actually 77% of non-healthcare employees feel safe to carry out their work. So a quarter of your people doesn't feel safe to carry out their work while at the job, while at the floor. So think about this when you set up new measures or new rules. Do you actually take care of the feeling of safety as well? And this relates to the human need for the certainty part, which we just talked about. 63% of employees can find a balance between work and relaxation. I find this shockingly low, to be honest, because 63% means that 40% is around not being able to balance their work and life. And for me personally, as a father of two very young children, one is 6 months old, one is 2.5, I can imagine this is tough because, you finish your work, log off, go down, do all the stuff that you need to do, go back up, open your computer, finish some work. So it goes on, and people are trying to adapt or accommodate to this new way of working and this new life. And maybe this is just an accommodation feeling. So we see this going up in the next 1 or 2 years as well. finally, 76% of employees can do their work effectively. And I'm happy to see this go up because this was 67% last year. And I think we're more accommodating to working from home, offering people good workplaces, good internet, etc., etc. So I think it's a good fact that people finally have the enablement and have the feeling of effectively working from their homes or from their offices. Now, the question, of course, is what can you do to take care of these factors? I'm going to share these trades in a bit, but most of all, most importantly, it's making sure that you adjust your mindset, not on the short term, but very much on the long term. Because people are looking for certainty and they want to understand that they have a significant contribution to the success of the organization. We looked at that model of needs. And that means that they expect from you as a leader in HR or as a leader in the business to adapt a long-term mentality. They want to know for sure that you're taking care of them in the future. They want to be sure that you're not only dealing with the fires that come up tomorrow, next week, next month, but also with the fires that are coming up in the next 10 years. If you think about a very recent development, is the transition from Facebook to Meta. Maybe you've seen that in the news, maybe you've read about it, maybe you're part of the user group, just like pretty much everyone in the Western society right now, which is using Facebook or one of their brands, and you see them rebrand to Meta. I think this is the perfect example of a company that thinks about the long-term future rather than just a short-term example, because they really thought about what is it that we need to do to ensure that we engage our user group in the next 10, 20, 30 years, beyond the development of the internet, as they call it. They want to move to the metaverse. This is a long-term mentality. That's really looking at the future. And I really challenge you to do the same. Start adjusting your mindset. Don't only brush the fires of tomorrow, brush them for next year and next 5 years as well. Now, of course, it's really important to ensure that you have an engaged workforce. Because employee engagement, especially if you want to have a long-term mindset, it matters, especially in a time of pandemic. It helps you to bounce back. As I said, organizations need to be flexible. They need to be taking care of new developments as they come up. And an engaged workforce allows you to do more with less because people are willing to take the extra step. It allows you to innovate, even though it seems contradictory. Why would you innovate during a time when times are tough? But innovation will help you to come out of this crisis as a winning company. And it will help you to align your organization to ensure that everyone looks into the same direction and comes along in terms of the future goals for your company. So engagement matters. But engagement at work is suffering at the same time. And we see a disbalance between the organization and coworkers. So your coworkers are on the one hand suffering because of the fact that they are disengaged or distracted from all the changes which are happening. And remote workers are in generally less engaged. It's not my theory. This is a scientifically proven article which shows that remote workers have a less level of engagement. At the same time, organizations are juggling the long term and the short term. So even if you want to adjust to a long-term mindset, it's tough if you also have to take care of the developments in the environment or in the business world around you. So we see that engagement is suffering from the coworker, whereas they try to balance with the needs and the requirements for the organization as well. And when we look at engagement at Effectory, we actually adapt to a 3-tier model. The engagement commitment model that we're looking at, and I think this is a great illustration of how you can measure engagement or how you can look at the experience in the work floor, is by looking at a high level of engagement. So do you like the job that you're doing? And also at the commitment. So let's say the loyalty or the love for the company that you're doing, that you're having. This can all be very high. And then of course, it's a great achievement for HR, for the business, for all your managers, for your team leads, to have this highly engaged and committed staff. But do you allow them as well to perform and have a strong performance environment where they can excel with that engagement and commitment that they're feeling, that feeling of being able to catalyze that engagement and to really perform up to the standard which is expected? Now, if you think about examples where you have a high engagement commitment, but a low performance environment, these are the companies that have, let's say, misdirected potential. So it's a wasted potential. These guys don't get the chance to really take the next step. On the other hand, and unfortunately we see this a lot in more traditional organizations, we see that performance environment is very high. There's a lot of emphasis and need on performance, but the actual engagement and commitment is low. So just consider for yourself, where do I stand in this figure? Where should I plot myself? Am I a more effective organization or more ineffective? Also think about teams, because this can of course change per business unit, per country, per team, per shift. Some shifts in your production plans might have a very high performance environment but very low engaged and committed people, whereas in their offices you might have very highly engaged and committed people, but you don't allow them to show that commitment. Now, if we look at the trends that we observe around us in terms of development of engagement and commitment, we see that engagement versus age, whether it's in the North America or in the European context, doesn't change very much. So what you see here is that the older people get, they remain with the same level of engagement, averagely. In North America, this rises to, well, a pretty much higher level if you look at the level of age versus engagement. So the older they get, the more engaged people will become. So this is interesting for your older population, because if you're having a North America branch, you definitely want to also hire for older people. Your talents don't necessarily have to be young people, as some people might describe it. Talents are also the people which are good at something in an older age. Now, it becomes interesting if you're a global organization, because now, if you look at the Middle East or in Asia, there's a very different development of engagement. So the older people get in Asia, the less engaged you become. But this is in the Asian context. Just consider for yourself, if you're a multinational, having multiple nationalities in your offices, there might already be cultural bias towards the engagement within the company that you're running. So think about that when you're with your hiring decisions, but also when you want to remain your talents. Who are these people that are sitting here, and are they still engaged? And can we, well, maybe predict something around their engagement levels based on the backgrounds that they have in terms of culture and nationality? Also, if we look at job tenure, and I really like to show this as well, because it shows you that the longer you keep people in, and this is a business case for why it's important to retain your talent, is because the longer people are in, the higher the level of both commitment and engagement will be. So the higher the engagement becomes, the longer they're working for you, and also the longer tenure relates to longer commitment. So there's a definite business case for having people on board for a longer time. Now, also the intention to stay is getting higher, whereas the only region where you see a change, and this is the orange line here, is the APAC region, where the older people become, the less likely they are to stay within your organization. But it relates to that engagement level. So the lower the engagement, the higher the chances that people will leave. Averagely, globally, within Europe, we see that people have a pretty average level of intention to leave. But if you plot this against the tenure, so the longer people have been working for you, you see actually a big change. So a lot of people, the longer they work for your organization, the more likely they are to stay indoors. Apart from a little cultural bias within the Asian region, the APAC region. So just again, consider the cultural influences and biases that you might see on your tenure, on your intention to stay, on your engagement and your commitment levels. Now, the big question, of course, and I promise you 14 traits, the big question is, what can we do about it? We've seen some of the development trends. We've seen the model of engagement, but also the ability to perform. We've seen the model of Robbins, who says there's 6 drivers, 6 human needs: certainty, variety, significance, connection, contribution, and growth. These are the intrinsic drivers of your talent to remain within your organization. So what are those 14 traits, the 7 traits, the 7 secrets of good employers? And if you want to really become a winner from this pandemic, despite all the impact and all the changes which are happening, but if you want to come out of this crisis as a winner, maybe as at least a healthy business, The most important part is to offer your people a very healthy employee experience and to keep the people on board, which you really need to catalyze development and innovate. First of all, make sure that you connect with your people and offer them perspective and purpose. And this is sometimes in different functions or different teams observed in a different way. Perspective and purpose means you provide a future perspective, the long-term part, and an appealing purpose where people really intrinsically feel that this is something they want to work for, that they want to run for, put the extra mile, say, yeah, I want to make sure that my company reaches this super interesting target. Now, if you offer a good perspective on and an interesting purpose to work for, you will see that people become more confident about the future, that your eNPS rises significantly, 36%, and you want to ensure that people have a feeling of confidence for the future, that their trust in management, and also have the feeling of certainty that the organization takes care of their future as well. But the secret here is, and this is the secret towards making it appealing, is that talents will tell you that motivation of purpose comes from a truly appealing direction for employees. And we can talk about the purpose of every individual organization, the big question of why are we here, or what do we contribute to the world? But the big question is, of course, is it appealing enough for your people to follow it up and say, this is something that I want to strive for? And I can tell you from experiences and from the insights that we get from these surveys that we do, it's not a financial target. It's not a KPI. It's not something that you can write out and say, well, we're going to work towards 2 million annual recurring revenue growth for our team. Those are the motivational drivers that will say people, okay, this is a performance environment, but not necessarily where I have the ability to craft my own jobs or be autonomous in the way how I reach this. The motivation of purpose comes from a direction that gives you an intrinsic feeling of this is something that also relates to my nature, to my values, to my purpose for me as a being. Second trait, in terms of what you can do to become a winning company, is to enable people, to allow them to be effective in their jobs. If you enable your people, you will see there's a high influence and impact on your productivity. So for anyone working in operations, this is the business case to make sure that people can do their jobs effectively. Also, people will be better able to support clients, and there's a better feeling of collaboration, which relates directly to the feeling of connectedness or connection that people strive for when they want to connect with their teams. But to achieve this, and this is a call for a lot of the C-level leaders, you'll need to be sure that you're providing inspiring leadership that works shoulder to shoulder. The talents that we talk to who say, I left my company to work somewhere else, the majority said, I didn't leave my company, I left my manager, or I left my leadership, because they didn't trust, on the one hand, that they had the best intrinsic motivation for their people, so the leadership was working for them, but also they saw their management somewhere up in the high ivory tower, but they weren't actually part of the business population. And there's certain companies that have done this very well. I love Branson, the way he dances throughout his Virgin Air crew and works shoulder to shoulder with his team. But there's other examples as well. Think about the big postal services. In the last 2 weeks of the year, when packages, like the demand and the volumes of packages rise, and this is the biggest postal services, let's say in DPDHL, you will see that management becomes part of the sorting centers and the distribution and the delivery of postal services as well. So these guys understood that it's not only about sitting in the big tower in the head offices in Bonn or in Munich or in Frankfurt. No, they know that they need to become part of the teams as well, to be visible, to be seen on the work floor. So work shoulder to shoulder and be visible, be inspiring as a leader. Thirdly, if you want to be connected to your teams, it's important to still come together, to show, to be visible as a leader, but also to connect with the teams. Right now, we see that 61% of people is worried about their company, about their personal well-being. And if you think about this, there's a big lack of trust as well. So people have lacking trust in the abilities of their colleagues, and this harms collaboration between teams. So ensure that you come together, connect, be visible, be available in the team stand-ups, in the weekly coffee breaks, in whatever moment you create. And think about the first weeks of the pandemic. Everybody was doing online drinks, Friday afternoon, pub quizzes online, what have you. If I look at the business environment now, we've kind of got sloppy a bit. Maybe in HR, we forgot that it's still important to keep connecting, but that we're also the drivers of this connection. We don't have to do it. We don't have to be in all these meetings, but we can facilitate. We can facilitate our managers to take their role. It's something for the business, not necessarily only for HR, but ensure that you come together. And because people are so much worried, make sure that you actively share information. And this is a call for transparency. We see a lot that people feel that there's not, yeah, activated or handled in the best possible interest of the employees because they feel they're left out of certain important information. They're uncertain about the future of work, about the future of their companies, and then they see that information is not shared actively throughout the organization. So we actively call for a transparency from top to the lowest levels in the teams. Keep actively sharing information to ensure people are remain engaged to the company. Fourth trait, ensure that you keep innovating. I just shared the example of Facebook motivating their people to move to the metaverse and to say, well, let's take our whole company, thousands of people, and think about and use the collective intelligence to say, what are we going to do to become an even better, bigger, more global company? So keep innovating. Ensure that you become the next winner from the pandemic, because now is the time to also consider what can we do better in terms of processes, in terms of product, in terms of developments that you're making, in terms of your sales process, whatever you want to do, whatever you need to innovate, which can be more efficient, more productive, more easy to develop. And it doesn't have to be this whole new product. It could also just be a very minor thing. As long as you keep tweaking and thinking about, hey, we've got this time, I'm here in my basement or in my attic. Okay, what can I do to help my company develop? And this, from the individual to the team, to the region, to the company, will lead to a higher level of innovation. Of course, people that have a feeling of a culture of innovation will also be more encouraged to contribute their ideas. And just use that collective intelligence. Maybe you're working with a company of 200,000 people, and how good would it be if you use the collective intelligence of the people on the floor who are dealing with your clients day to day, who are working with your customers on a daily basis? And if you want to innovate, the big secret for this, and maybe it's not really a surprise, but you want to eradicate those superfluous rules and bureaucracy. I've been part of a huge corporate, and I can tell you the biggest demotivation that I've had was where the bureaucracy took over from the idea of innovation. And yeah, me as a young worker back then had to fill out all the different forms to file for some kind of new development. It's a huge killer of creativity, of the feeling of autonomous, the autonomy, of trust, because you have to fill in all the forms first and make sure that everything is reported on before you can actually move on. So take away those rules. Just think about what is really necessary. There's a super nice example of a company, chocolate producing company, who've been bringing back their employment contracts to one A4 paper. So the most important company values and rules are on that one paper. Everything else has been eradicated. And it still works. These guys are still in business for the last 5 years. They've made a huge profit. So think about whether it's really necessary to write out all these employment handbooks, etc., or that you can deal with, let's say, the main lines, and the rest people will find themselves. And what you will do, relating to the model of needs and also to what your people want to develop themselves, you will help them in the feeling of significance. You will help them to grow because they can develop the skills themselves. But also, they feel significantly part of the business, more than if they have to report everything to a manager before they can actually move to the next level. Fifth trait related to innovation is definitely education. Ensure that people develop themselves professionally, personally, and keep educating them to ensure that they keep up with the latest standards in the industry, that they need to develop their skills. Because if you keep educating people, they're less likely to leave. We see that 31% of people are more likely to leave when there's not sufficient development opportunities. And if you want to educate, you also appreciate your specialists. And this is a call, we'll come to the next secret in a minute, but this is a call to please keep appreciating your specialists, because your company is not growing only with management or leadership. Your company is growing by the people who do it on a daily basis, the guys who are at it every day, the experts, the guys who know everything about, well, those one tiny difficult processes that you need, or the tiny products that you need to develop your company. So appreciate these people, pay them well. We have a huge discussion in the Netherlands about the payments of our healthcare system. And these people are dealing with the COVID patients on a day-to-day basis, but they're just not appreciated sufficiently. So keep appreciating how much work they do. It doesn't have to be a monetary incentive only, as long as you give them the recognition that they've done a good job. As a manager, it's your duty to appreciate what people are doing, and it will give them the feeling of significance and also connection to you as a manager. Sixth trait, allow people to step up. Maybe this is a bit of a late call in terms of the pandemic, because we've seen this especially happening in the start, where people who didn't have a appointed leadership role actually were allowed to say, wait a minute, there's a pandemic going on, we need to step up, take our role, and bring our company forward, or I'll take the team, I'll take the lead. When leaders are in quarantine because they weren't able to go to work, or when they're hit by COVID or whatever personal problems they had, people stepped up and said, I'll take care of it, let me do it. And this was a huge influence on their feeling of engagement. So if you want people to step up, make sure that you also allow them to share their ideas, because a lot of people think that their ideas are not used by the organization, and people don't feel safe to voice their opinions. So if you want them to step up, make sure that you value what they actually tell you and what they're bringing in. Finally, when people feel safe to do this, they feel more engaged and more included. Now, the big secret here, and maybe it's not a surprise, but if you want people to step up, maybe you want to also minimize your management. So you want to appreciate your specialists on the one hand. The big feedback that people are providing for why they left the company was that they said, at some point I wanted to step up, but there were so many management levels that we had to go through before we could get something done. To me, it was too much. And you would get very heavy in the top and very slim at the bottom. So minimize your management, eradicate your bureaucracy, and see how much more flexible and fluent you can become as a company. And finally, the big one, I think this relates very much to the trend that we see in terms of balancing work and life. Help reach people a sustainable work-life balance. If you're in lockdown, allow them to go to the gym at 10 o'clock in the morning. It's not going to harm anyone to do a bit of sports, because it will help your company in the end to also have healthy and good feeling people on board. But also make sure that they can log off, that they can turn off their computers. Some people are very strict in this. I've read about this recent article where a company throughout the global population said after 6 p.m. you cannot send any emails anymore. They will only be delivered to you next morning. First was a bit of an adjustment period, and then people said, okay, this works fine to me. And I think this is the big challenge. Maybe this is a bit too much. You don't have the trust that people will do this themselves. On the other hand, maybe you need to help them a bit as an employer to really reach that work-life balance, to say, well, you've done your work, I give you recognition for what you've done, you've provided a significant contribution to our organization, and now it's time to chill out, to relax, to sit back, and also enjoy the wonders of life. And if you look at the way that people prefer the future of work, they want to reach this work-life balance with a hybrid form of work. So 76% of employees indicate that they rather have a hybrid form where they go to the office 2 days and 3 days work from home, because it helps them to kill out the commute from their daily practice. They can put the kids to bed. They will have dinner with their families. And I think in the adjustment period after these 2 years of pandemic, people got used to also enjoy these personal wonders. So why not last with this and help this sustain for the future? And if you want to really know what people need, then it's really important to make use of the social intelligence or the collective intelligence that people are sharing. These are the ideas that your people are sharing on a day-to-day basis. As a company, as a factory, we're happy to share the experiences and the knowledge that we have with the population like you out there. But it's also important to listen intrinsically and internally to your own people. What is it that they're sharing with you? What is it that they really want to, yeah, as a personal improve their working conditions, their employee experience, but also what is it that they need in terms of hybrid work, leadership, coaching? How can they feel more growth in their professional careers? So these kind of things all come out when you really make use of the collective intelligence that is in there in your organizations. So we've shared 7 traits, 7 secrets. Now the question, of course, is what makes talent stay? And here we can combine the different models that we've seen. First of all, there's these 6 basic human needs. And I highly encourage you to look into that model to define for yourself, did we really provide this within our organization? Or should we do something to improve it to ensure that people stay in our company? Secondary, do you provide an engaging and committed workforce? Also the place where they're enabled to perform. So whenever you have the engagement and commitment, do you also have a performance enabling environment? And thirdly, and we looked at the list of traits and secrets, and I'm going to share them with you in a bit. Do you allow people to be enabled to be effective, to appreciate your specialists? These kind of things are definitely important to ask for yourself, to say, wait a minute, did we cover all of that to ensure that people remain in-house? And then if you want to become a world-class workplace, of course, then it's important to still have that appealing direction, to be inspiring as leadership, offer perspective, limit bureaucracy, minimize your management, appreciate those specialists, make use of collective intelligence, like we said, and actively share information. These are the 7 secrets which talents are telling us day in, day out in the surveys. These are the let's say the big trends that we observe throughout the millions of data points that we have, where people say this is what I'm sometimes missing in companies, or what I'm so much valuing that I want to remain with this company for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Now, good leadership, and this is my final call to you to make sure that you're part of also that employee experience. Good leadership can help to create an optimal employee experience. Because good leadership, and there's of course tons of definitions of good leadership. I think we can have a separate webinar, web session around what does good leader, like what does it entail, what does it mean, but it's different for every company. It's fit with the culture, with the business values, with the mission. So good leadership is something that you can only define for what it is for your population. But when we see high scores on leadership, we also see that it creates much more trust in management. It ensures better employership. It provides a higher level of NPS, a higher team productivity. People are better able at handling change effectively. And I think this relates very much to the feeling of autonomy. So if you're having a good leadership, or if you have good leaders on board, you allow people to step up themselves. You don't only tell them what to do, but you take them by the hand, you coach them and tell them, hey, there's different ways, go try it out, make mistakes, and then you will ensure that people feel the trust and the significance that they need to develop themselves, and therefore also be able to handle change effectively, especially at the time of pandemic, corona crisis. This is important. And finally, it provides more engaged employees. So good leadership has a direct influence on engagement. Now, to be effective and be effective as a leader, and this is my call to really apply effective employee listening, you need to make sure that you know as a leader where you stand and how you make the right decisions going forward. Effective listening means from the onboarding moment to exit, and any moment when people join, when you want to tap into the moment of career development, of change. You want to understand how's our well-being, how's our inclusion level, how's our diversity. That's when you really need to go for the call and say, what do I need to know from my people, whether it's organization wide or topical polls related, and to say, okay, these are the things that I need to, and you can obtain this from an effective listening strategy to really on a continuous cycle engage with your people and say, this is what I need to know to make the best decision going forward. Second to that, if you want to be effective in employee listening and also understand what your people need, you need to make it fit for the purpose of the people, for the stakeholders that are using this information. And we identified three groups in this. First, your coworkers, because they need to be able to self-reflect and say, what's my own personal contribution to success? How can I take ownership for my development? Secondary, your teams or your countries, your locations, your regions, they want to understand what are the points of improvement for us. How can I use the insights that my listening provides to me as a leader, but then also with my team to take a data-driven decision and move forward within the sphere of my influence. And finally, you need to understand that there's a third group, the stakeholders, and this is usually you within HR, but also in the C-level, that wants to look at the long term, provide those key strategic linkages, have the management information to really obtain the needs of the company at large. And this combines with the different traits that you've just seen. They're all influential at different levels. Of course, for group, the strategic insights provide the most decision-making power to really say, guys, as a company at large, we've decided on taking this step moving forward because you told us that this is an important part. But at the same time, the group management can only influence so much. They provide the borders or the framework for the future, but the teams are actually doing it with the co-workers in the field. So consider that when you want to take your employee listening strategy forward and you want to ensure that you have take the right decisions to improve the employee experience, that you make it fit with the level of the different stakeholders, and that you have an encompassing picture that will provide you with the right direction. Finally, what can Effectory do for you? We can help you create impact with a very regular, efficient, and consistent feedback collection that allows for the flexibility and diversity of your workforce, but also provides maximum user friendliness. So ensure that if you want to know what are the traits that most influence my organization, whether it's the enablement level or whether it's good leadership, that you know what it is on a local level that people need up to the group level. And we are very happy to help you with a very user-friendly setup. Good. Quick recap. Ensure you tell the story of engagement and adapt to a long-term mentality. These are the key critical highlights for what I wanted to share, for which I very much call to you and say, well, so maybe challenge you, ensure that you tell this in your organization and adapt the long-term mentality. COVID is going to be over. Of course, we need to brush the fires tomorrow, but COVID will at some point eradicate and maybe become the next normal. So what is it that you need to do then to come out of this crisis as a winner with your company? Then enable, offer perspective, educate people, come together, allow people to innovate, be creative, think of new ideas, new processes, allow people to step up, and balance work and life. Make sure that people know when to quit and that they have a healthy work-life balance to be able to get through this pandemic, not get wasted by leave or by absenteeism. Make sure that they can remain at work for the next 3, 5, 10 years, because the longer tenure they have, the more likely they are to stay within your company. And finally, set up your employee listening effectively to know where you stand on all these different factors, to understand what is it that I need to do to make sure that I get out of this crisis as a winner. Good. That was 45 minutes of intense presentation. I hope that this was very useful to you as well. We're open to answer any of your questions. So if you have any, please send them out in the chat. I would like to express my gratitude to Zukunft to share our story from my personal level, from Effectory. It's been a true pleasure to share this story with you as well. Also happy to have you in my home office, so you've seen a bit of my house. And yeah, if there's anything that we can do for you, just reach out to me directly, send me a chat message or something on LinkedIn. And also you can still share any of your questions in the chat, and I'm more than happy to answer them. Good. Well, I think the story's been very clear so far. There are some questions which probably have been answered during the storyline already, so I'm happy to hear that. Thank you very much again. I wish you a wonderful Wednesday. I hope that this 1st of December will lead to a very great festive month where Christmas, the New Year's break are coming up. Enjoy your time together, connect, have that feeling of connectedness with your family, your loved ones, your colleagues as well. And I wish you a great day. Thank you very much.